She came in like any other Tuesday, keys on the counter, eyes on her phone. I was already at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, the chair legs square to the tile like a jury box. I didn't shout. I didn't stand. I said calm as a prayer, "Sarah, do you love him?" Her thumb froze mid-scroll. Color left her face like someone opened a drain. I said his name, David, and watched the truth land between us with a dull, heavy sound. Months of late nights, silenced calls, new perfume that wasn't for me, all of it lined up like evidence bags. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look. I knew what was waiting there. I raised a hand. "Don't lie. Not tonight." The refrigerator hummed. Sarah lowered herself into the chair like her knees forgot how to work. I slid my phone across the table, screen down. "Sit," I said. "Listen, now." What I found on her phone wasn't just a name. It started small. She laughed at something on her phone, the kind of quick private laugh people have at work memes. We were in the kitchen making a grocery list, paper, pen, the usual back and forth about cereal brands, and out of nowhere, that little grin. I said, easy as breathing, "What's funny?" She said, "Nothing," and flipped the screen face down like it was a reflex. At our age, you learn to pick your battles, so I kept writing, milk, eggs, coffee, but my hand felt heavier. On the drive to Costco, she kept her phone in her lap, screen dark, and every time it buzzed, she squeezed it like a secret. I reminded myself people are allowed private moments. I told myself marriage isn't surveillance. We made it through the aisles in silence. At checkout, the clerk joked about buying for a party. Sarah smiled with her eyes somewhere else. That night, I put the receipt in the drawer and asked again, "Who was it?" She said, "Just work," and turned off the light. A week later, she left for the office smelling like someone I hadn't met. Not the bottle I bought last Christmas, not the fresh, clean one she wore in spring. This was warmer, heavier, a scent that hung in the hallway after the door closed. Scent sticks to memory when you're older. Your dad's aftershave, your mom's laundry soap, your first apartment's musty carpet. You can't talk yourself out of smell. I asked, gentle, "New fragrance?" She said, "Sample from a friend," and pivoted to whether we needed to trim the hedges. That night I looked under the sink, lined up bottles, none of them that one. The next morning she sprayed it again before an early meeting. She didn't kiss my cheek. She used to. The perfume lingered on my coffee mug when I lifted it from the counter. I stood there, breathing it in like a stranger had just walked through my kitchen. It didn't smell like us. It smelled like someplace I wasn't invited. But the scent wasn't the only thing that didn't belong. The first time heading to my sister's felt fine. We've all done those last-minute family runs, drop off documents, help with a leaky faucet, sit with a nephew while someone works a double. I asked what time she'd be back. "Late," she said. She packed a small overnight bag, the good heels she never wears on Sundays, and the red sweater that photographs well. On the way out, she said, "You don't mind, do you?" I said, "No, of course, because marriage is built on yeses that keep the peace." She sent one photo from a living room I didn't recognize. No family pictures on the wall, no kids' sneakers piled by the door. "New place," she texted. "They just moved." Maybe, maybe not. The funny thing about getting older is you spot patterns, the way a story repeats with the details slightly rearranged. When the garage opened close to midnight, I sat up in bed and listened. She came in barefoot, heels in hand, like she didn't want the house to hear. That was the night I started timing everything. Late nights got normal. Quarterly close, client dinner, traffic's a nightmare. I've used those lines myself. Any man who's done years at a desk knows the grind, the emails sent at 9:47 p.m. to prove you're still breathing. So I gave the benefit of the doubt, right up until the doubt started to feel like a full-time job. Nights stretched past midnight. The key turned slower, the garage door eased down, and the clock glowed a truth that didn't match her stories. I asked careful questions. "Everything okay at work? How's your sister doing?" I tried to make space without cornering her. The answers came back sharp around the edges. "Why are you interrogating me?" "You're being paranoid." If you've been married long enough, you know that word lands like a slap you can't see. I did the thing men my age do when we want our home to stay calm. I swallowed it. I apologized for making it weird. I mowed the lawn, I fixed the gate, I stacked the mail. I reminded myself about seasons, how couples drift and come back if you give them room. But the room started to feel like distance, and the distance started to feel like a wall. One night she laughed at something on her phone in the bathroom with the water running, and when she came to bed she said, "Please stop inventing problems." I stared at the ceiling fan and thought of every time I'd told a friend to trust his gut. I didn't sleep. There's a kind of loneliness you don't feel at 20. It's the quiet that settles into the furniture, into the coffee maker that only brews for one, into the dent on your side of the couch. I'd set 2 plates out of habit and slide one back in the cabinet when the clock hit 9. The dog started lying by the door like he knew when she wouldn't come. Saturday mornings used to be pancakes, her music playing low, sunlight across the table. Lately it was emails and errands and me fixing things that weren't broken. I told myself this is what marriages survive. Dips, tired months, grown-up ruts. Then I caught myself narrating the day in my head so the house would sound less empty. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a phase I needed to outlast. It was a life I was living alone beside someone. I washed a single coffee cup and set it upside down to dry. The silence answered back. The night it broke, the room was navy dark and the house finally still. Her phone lit the ceiling with that cold blue square of light. I don't snoop. I never have. But when a name floats up at 3 in the morning, you don't have to be 20 to understand what it means. David. Not mom, not carpool, not a boss who emails at insane hours. David. The message preview was short, the kind people send when they know you don't need full sentences anymore. My chest went quiet before my brain did. I rolled to my side and watched the glow fade and come back, like a beacon for a ship I didn't know was docked in my harbor. She pulled the phone closer to her pillow, face turned away. I stared at the outline of her shoulder and counted the seconds between buzzes. By the 5th one, the story I'd been writing for months finally wrote itself. I wasn't paranoid, I was awake. But what I saw at dawn made awake feel like denial. I woke before the alarm and watched the room go from blue to gray. At this age, you learn that hard talks go better with daylight. I brewed coffee, set 2 mugs on the table, and let the house warm up around me. When Sarah came out in her robe, I didn't circle the runway. I landed. "Sarah," I said, steady. "Who is David?" The name sat on the table like a third-place setting. She blinked hard, reached for the mug she didn't taste, and tried to smile like we were running late for normal life. "What are you talking about?" she asked. No anger in my voice, no sarcasm. "The messages last night," I said. 3 a.m. I watched the color shift in her face and felt my own heartbeat slow down, like a truck downshifting before a hill. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. She looked at the door as if a script might be taped there. I kept my eyes on hers. "Tell me the truth." Because the worst part wasn't the name, it was the dates. She went straight to the oldest trick in marriage, confuse the question and buy time. "You know I get late emails," she said. "Vendors, clients, my sister." She shrugged, wide and helpless, like she'd lost the keys to the day. "David who?" The way she said it told me she knew exactly who. I let the silence stand up for me. Men my age learn that silence is a tool, not a threat. She took a sip she didn't want and stared at the backsplash like it might offer help. "Are you really doing this?" she asked, softer now, like the problem was my courage to ask. I nodded once. "Yes." She glanced toward her phone on the counter. The screen was dark but loud in the room. "There's nothing going on," she said. "You're making something out of nothing." I remembered all the nights I had swallowed doubt to keep the peace. Not today. "Then look me in the eye," I said, "and say his name means nothing. I've seen men blow up and break things. It never fixes the truth." I kept my voice even, the way you talk to a doctor before a big test. She waited for me to shout. I didn't. I folded the dish towel, lined up the edges, and set it square by the sink. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to understand." That landed heavier than any slammed door. She tried to hand me anger like a hot pan I would drop. I didn't take it. "You're paranoid," she whispered, but it sounded like a line she practiced in the mirror. "Maybe," I said, "and maybe not." I pulled out a chair and sat, palms flat, like a man ready to hear a verdict. "This is your moment to tell the truth." And if she didn't, my phone would. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a delivery truck downshifted. I thought of my father's advice: measure twice, cut once. I had measured for months. Now I was ready to cut. "Sarah," I said, "stop spinning. Start talking." I didn't want a performance. I wanted facts. I took my phone from my pocket and placed it between us, screen down. "Everything I need is right here," I said. Her eyes went to it like it was a live wire. Texts, photos, times. I tapped the cover once and let the weight of that sound do the work. "Before we look," I added, "I'm giving you a chance to say it yourself." She stared at the wood grain as if the pattern might open a door. I could feel the years of our life together: birthdays, vacations, small Tuesdays, stacked behind us like boxes in a garage. "If I'm wrong," I said, "I'll apologize. Right now." I meant it, but I wasn't wrong. She reached for the phone and stopped halfway, fingers hovering in the air. A tiny shake ran through her hand. "Michael," she said, and her voice cracked on my name. That was the first truth of the morning. I flipped the phone, unlocked it, and slid it closer. The first message on the screen was enough. "You don't need a novel when a headline tells the story." Her breath hitched, and the words came fast, tripping over each other. "It's not what it looks like. We were going through a rough patch. It was nothing. It was a mistake." Older men know that sentence well. It travels from generation to generation, like bad furniture you keep moving house to house. I didn't argue with the word. I asked the only question that matters. "How many times?" She closed her eyes like the number lived on the inside of her eyelids. "It's over," she said instead. I ended it. I nodded at the timeline on the screen that clearly hadn't ended. "When?" She swallowed. "I was going to." The coffee had gone cold between us. I pushed the mug aside to clear the view of the facts. "Look at the dates," I said, softer than I felt. "Look at me." She finally did. That was the second truth. She stood up like flight could rescue her. I kept my seat and let my voice lower a notch. "Sarah, sit down." Not a threat, a boundary. It surprised her more than anger would have. She sat, but only halfway, like she might spring if a better option walked in. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, and for a second I saw the girl I married, scared of consequences, hoping for a softer landing. "Then stop," I said. "Stop adding new lies to the pile." I turned the phone so the timestamps faced her. "This is Tuesday. This is Friday. This is last night." She wiped at her face with the heel of her hand, the way people do when they're trying to erase a scene. "I was lonely," she whispered. "So was I said. "And I didn't do this." The dog barked down the hall, one single note that echoed how thin the house had become. She finally settled fully in the chair. The running stopped. We sat there, two people who used to share everything, sharing a table with a phone between us. The quiet grew muscles. It pressed on the room, on the clock, on the space between her apology and my answer. Shouting would have been easier. It burns hot and leaves quick. This was cold and heavy, like winter ice that doesn't crack until spring. I let the silence say what I couldn't dress up with words. The trust was already gone. She reached across as if she could close the distance with a touch. I drew my hands back and kept my eyes steady. "I would rather live with a hard truth," I said, "than sleep beside a soft lie." Her face crumpled. A tear hit the table and spread like a map. For a long beat, no one moved. Then I laid the phone flat again and slid it to the center, the way a judge might slide a file. "This is where we are," I said. "What happens next is choice." But there was one choice I hadn't said out loud yet. I stood up slow, the way you do when the game is over and there's nothing left to argue with the scoreboard about. I reached for my jacket on the back of the chair and felt the weight of my keys like a small decision made of metal. Sarah started to say my name, soft and broken, but I shook my head. We've both lived long enough to know when a room has run out of words. I slid one arm into the sleeve, then the other, checked for my wallet, phone, and the stubborn dignity men carry when the line finally gets drawn. The kitchen looked smaller with the truth sitting in it. I pushed my chair in because my father raised me right, then turned toward the door. "Michael, please," she said. The tone took me back to years when please meant something we could fix. I glanced at the clock, noted the hour, and opened the door. Some goodbyes don't require speeches. They require feet. She followed me into the entryway, hands wringing the hem of her sweater like she could twist the night into a better shape. "Don't go," she said. "We can talk. We can figure this out." I stepped into my shoes and kept my eyes on the mat, on the dirt from last weekend's yard work I still hadn't swept. There's always one chore left undone. "Michael, please, don't leave me like this." I lifted my head. I didn't reach for anger or poetry. I found the word I could live with. "Out," I said. Simple, final. A boundary built with 2 letters and 20 years of lessons. She tried again, listing promises and plans, but the sound grew thin against the door. I put my hand on the knob and saw my wedding ring catch the light. It looked heavier than it felt. "Out," I repeated, softer but clearer. I opened the door without slamming it. Kindness doesn't require permission. It requires distance. The hallway felt like a church after the last hymn. Quiet, benches empty, the air still holding the echo of people. I closed the apartment door gently, because I wasn't going to break anything on my way to saving myself. The carpet carried every neighbor's story, but tonight it cushioned only mine. At our age, you count the times you've walked out and the fewer times you decided not to. I stood for a second under the buzz of a tired fluorescent bulb and let my breath catch up. No shouting behind me, no footsteps coming after me. Just that soft, mechanical hum and the distant ding of an elevator that always takes longer at night. I pressed the button and watched the numbers climb like a slow promise. My phone buzzed in my palm. I didn't look. The doors opened and I stepped in, catching my reflection in the stainless steel. I looked like a man who had finally stopped negotiating with the inevitable. That was new. I drove with no plan, just the automatic dance of turn signal, lane change, and the kind of thinking you do with your hands at 10 and 2. The streets were half empty, the way they get on weeknights when most people finish their fights before 10. Muscle memory took over, and I ended up where memory likes to sit, the old parking lot by the river. We used to come here on summer nights with cheap ice cream and bigger dreams, back when the future felt like a wide-open ball field and not a narrow hallway. I killed the engine. Crickets and the low hum of the city took the front seat. The river moved like it always does, whether you're watching or not. I rolled down the window and let the air cool my face. Somewhere, a train horn pulled a long line through the dark. I thought about every map we once drew together. Then I thought about how many miles I'd already walked alone. Memories don't ask permission. They show up like old neighbors, hands in pockets, ready to stand in your driveway and talk about what used to be. I saw the summer she cut her hair short and laughed when the wind messed it up. I saw the winter we got stranded here because the car wouldn't start, and we stayed warm telling stories in our coats. Good days have a way of making you argue with the present. But the other reel runs too. The missed dinners, the phone turned face down, the way "I'm tired" became a permanent answer. I listened to both reels until they overlapped into a sound I recognized. Loss. At this age, you learn that grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a low bass note you feel in your chest. I put my forehead against the steering wheel and breathed. Loving someone doesn't require staying. Respecting yourself does. The river kept moving. I decided I would too. The phone lit up my lap like a fish finder on a dark lake. Her texts stacked, promises, bargains, sudden plans. I let the phone buzz until the noise proved I was done listening. I picked up the phone and stared at the screen long enough for the words to blur. "Please come home. We can fix this. I'll do anything." I've said "we'll fix it" about 100 things in my life. Leaky sinks, a starter that clicks, a fence that leans after a storm. Those things take tools and time. Trust takes something else. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and felt the car get quieter. Not silent, just honest. The river's small waves tapped the rocks like a metronome. I leaned back and let the headrest catch me. Breathing came in slow, then steadier, the way it does after you've shoveled the last of the snow and finally stepped back to look at the clean driveway. A new text buzzed under the glass. I didn't flip it. I didn't have to. I closed my eyes for a count of 10 and opened them to the same truth. I was done negotiating with pain. I pulled up to James's place because every man I know has that one friend with a light on, even past midnight. His porch had the same uneven step it always had. One more thing we kept meaning to fix and never did. I stood there a second, hand on the rail, letting the night settle into my bones. When he opened the door, he didn't give me the head tilt question people do. He just stepped aside. That's the thing about men our age. We don't need a pre-game speech to know the score. His living room smelled like coffee and old leather. The game on TV was muted, a frozen scoreboard in the corner. I sat on the couch I've sat on 100 times, the cushion that remembers me. He waited. I tried to start at the beginning and found there wasn't one. I needed somewhere not there, I said. He nodded once, slow, like a green light. The climax was simple. I wasn't alone anymore. James came back from the kitchen with 2 cold bottles and that small nod men use instead of a hug. He popped both caps with a church key opener and set one in my hand. No toast, no to better days. Just beer, which sometimes is the right kind of prayer. We watched the silent scroll of sports highlights, the kind that replay big moments you missed even when you saw them live. "You hungry?" he asked. I shook my head. He didn't press. Men who've been through a few winters know the difference between feeding and fixing. I took a pull and let the cold bite remind me I still had edges. "You don't have to talk," he said. "You also don't have to not talk." That loosened something. I told him about the phone, the perfume, the late nights, the name at 3 a.m. He listened the way you hold a ladder, steady, quiet, ready if I slipped. The climax. I said it out loud. It sounded true. We didn't fill the room with advice. We let the refrigerator hum from the kitchen and the clock tick like it had all the time in the world. When you've carried your share of weight, you understand that silence can be a chair to sit in, not a wall to push against. James shifted once, leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture of a man bracing a friend. "You want me angry for you?" he asked. I almost laughed. "I want to be smart," I said. He nodded. "Then let's not talk about her. Let's talk about you." It was the kindest reroute I've had in years. He asked me when I'd last slept, eaten, gone for a real walk. Simple questions with answers that made me feel older than my driver's license. "You know the drill," he said. "Water, food, rest, then plan." The quiet held us like a porch holds 2 chairs. The climax was the shift, from replaying the pain to preparing the next move. I finally said it the way a mechanic tells you the frame is bent. "It's worse than I thought." James didn't flinch. He reached for the remote, turned the TV black, and gave me the kind of eye contact most men avoid unless the stakes are high. "Okay," he said. "How bad?" I laid it out. The timeline, the lies, the way she looked at the door like the truth might walk in and rescue her. I told him about the river lot and the texts that stacked like sandbags against a flood that had already come through. Saying it out loud arranged the mess into rows I could count. He didn't offer the easy path. "No, maybe it's nothing. No, everyone goes through this." He said, "You're not crazy, and you're not stuck." That sentence felt like someone lifting the hood and finding a part that still worked. The climax. Permission to trust my eyes, and a map that started with the word forward. We let the night be long. My phone lit up the coffee table every few minutes, a small lighthouse for a ship I wasn't bringing in. "Please answer. Please come home. I'll explain." I flipped it over. James didn't ask to see. He just slid a coaster under it like he was protecting the wood. We talked about normal things because normal is a rope you can hold. The roof he needs to replace, the kid on his block who mows lawns crooked, the way the highway's gotten worse since they fixed it. Every so often the screen would glow again, and I'd feel that jolt in my chest, the one you get when a smoke alarm chirps at 2 a.m. We refilled the beers with water and called it good sense. Around 3, he tossed me a blanket that smelled like camping trips and rain. "Sleep if you can," he said. I did the next best thing. I rested my eyes and didn't answer. The climax was restraint. Dawn found the blinds and painted the room in lines. James brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and slid a mug across without ceremony. I felt wrung out but level, like a field after a storm. Messy, sure, but done with lightning. The texts had stopped sometime before sunrise. The quiet wasn't empty now. It was space. "What's the plan?" he asked. Older men know that question is a bridge, not a shove. I said the words I needed to hear from my own mouth. No more reacting. Today, I act. We wrote a short list on a yellow pad. Gather essentials, secure accounts, talk to a lawyer, find a place that's mine. Simple, actionable, adult. I called in late to work and didn't explain. James offered his truck for moving boxes and his spare key for when the day got longer than my patience. I finished the coffee, stood up, and felt my feet find the floor. The climax. I took my life back by making a plan. I went back to the apartment with a list and a purpose. Documents, clothes for a week, the photo albums no one backs up, the watch my father left me. When you're older, you learn what actually matters fits in fewer boxes than you think. I moved room to room like a firefighter, fast but careful. Tax folders into a tote, chargers coiled instead of ripped from the wall, shirts folded like I was packing for a long business trip I didn't choose. I left the big stuff because I wasn't here to erase history, just to claim the parts of me that still worked. The house smelled like the candle she lit last night, that sweet, everything's fine scent you buy when it isn't. I could feel my heartbeat settle into a working rhythm. Task, check, move. On the way out, I took one last sweep of the kitchen drawer where we keep the keys. I pocketed the spare and set hers on the counter. The climax. Boundaries, labeled and loaded. Even clean lines can cut both ways. Sarah stood in the hallway like she'd been there for hours, hair pulled back, eyes raw from crying. Grief makes adults look like children. "You're really doing this?" she asked, the question soft as a bruise. I kept my voice level. "I am." She reached for the bag on my shoulder, not to stop me, more like to prove it was real. "We can fix it," she whispered. I've repaired a lot in my life. Leaks, engines, fences after windstorms. Fixing starts with clean cuts and honest measurements. "I asked for honest," I said. "I got everything else." She swayed like the floor tilted. I wanted to catch her, the old reflex still wired into my hands, but I held the line. "Please," she said. The hall clock ticked so loud it felt like it was in my throat. "I'm not angry," I told her. "I'm done." She blinked hard, like the word didn't fit in the room. The climax, acceptance replacing argument. She followed me into the kitchen, voice fraying. "Is this to hurt me?" That's the story people prefer when consequences arrive. Punishment. It's cleaner than accountability. I set the tote by the door and turned to face her. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's me not living like this." When you're 30, that line sounds dramatic. At 50, it's maintenance. It's choosing not to drive a car with a bent frame at 80 miles an hour. She shook her head, searching for an angle with a softer edge. "Counseling," she said. "I'll delete everything. I'll quit my job." I thought of all the times I had made myself smaller to fit into a peace that wasn't peaceful. "I'm not negotiating with my own sanity," I said. The refrigerator kicked on like a referee's whistle. I picked up the tote and stepped back from the counter where we used to plan a life. The climax. I named the difference between hurting her and saving me. The elevator doors slid open and I stepped into my own reflection. Not a hero shot, just a man carrying a bag and a decision. The mirrored walls have watched every neighbor's story, but tonight they watched me meet myself. I saw the gray at my temples, the lines that showed up after years of everything's fine, and I didn't hate any of it. I pressed L and listened to the cable hum like a steady heartbeat. Floors ticked by, 5, 4, 3, and I remembered my father saying, "Measure twice, cut once." I had measured this for months. The cut was clean because the truth was straight. Somewhere above me, the apartment kept its shape without me in it. That realization didn't crush me. It freed me. The doors opened to the lobby and the night air reached in like a hand. I shifted the bag on my shoulder and walked out under the exit sign that's always been there. The climax. I recognized the man who leaves and lives. The rental was exactly what I needed and nothing more. A short couch, a little table, blinds that stuck halfway, a fridge with honest hums. I set the bag down and felt the space take my weight without asking questions. I grabbed a beer from the corner store across the street, cold, simple, and a styrofoam container of something hot that tasted like salt and relief. At our age, you learn that comfort isn't fancy. It's a door that locks and a room that doesn't argue with you. I ate on the floor and let the TV stay dark. The quiet wasn't empty. It was room to breathe. I plugged in my phone, turned off notifications, and wrote 3 lines on a notepad. Sleep, lawyer, new keys, plans small enough to keep and big enough to matter. I leaned back against the wall and listened to the building's bones, pipes, neighbors, the nightly soundtrack of people getting by. The climax. I felt safe in a place with nothing to prove. I've known loud silences, the kind that fill a room after a fight and make you wish for thunder. This wasn't that. This was the quiet of a house after the snowblower stops. Clean edges, no more noise you have to push. I sat with it and realized how long I'd been afraid to hear my own thoughts without her explanations layered over them. I opened the window an inch and let the city's soft sounds wash in. Tires on wet pavement, a dog 2 buildings over, someone laughing at a joke I didn't need to understand. I took a long pull from the beer and felt my shoulders drop a full inch. If you're lucky, you get a few moments in life that reset your altitude. This was one. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't mourning. I was calibrating. The phone, face down, stayed that way. I turned out the lamp and lay back, eyes open to the ceiling's quiet. The climax. Silence no longer hurt. It helped. I left work late and found her waiting by my car, arms wrapped around herself like the wind might blow her away. Office garages have that hollow echo. Footsteps sound like they belong to someone else. She stepped out from between 2 SUVs, eyes swollen, makeup doing the best it could. "Michael," she said, voice too small for concrete. I stopped a few feet short, the way you stop near a fence you used to jump without thinking. "I didn't know where else to go," she added, glancing around like a witness afraid to point. At our age, you learn to read the setting as much as the scene. Fluorescent lights, oil spots, a safety mirror that bends the truth at the corners. I kept my hands out of my pockets so she wouldn't mistake patience for softness. "We don't do this here," I said. She took a breath that sounded like a plea forming. I waited. The climax. I didn't rush in. I let the moment stand on its own legs. She closed the distance until I could smell that same warm perfume from the nights that broke me. "You can't erase us," she said, as if the history itself could vote. I thought of all the scrapbooks and ticket stubs and little notes in junk drawers that people point to when they want the past to outrank the present. "I'm not erasing," I said. "I'm choosing. Her face bent like the word hurt. "We have years," she whispered. "We do," I said, "and they brought us here." A car rolled by slow, headlights sliding across the concrete like a spotlight looking for a truth it could trust. She reached for my sleeve, the old path to softening me. I looked at her hand until she pulled it back. "Please," she said, "don't throw everything away." I shook my head. "No one threw everything away tonight," I said. "That happened months ago." The climax. I gave the past its due and refused it a vote on my future. She tried a new angle, the one where memory gets a makeover. "It wasn't like that," she said. "We were lost." That word does a lot of work for people who made maps with someone else's compass. "Sarah," I said, "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm remembering exactly what happened." She looked past me, eyes glassy with scenes I wasn't invited to. "I didn't plan it," she said. "It just—" I held up a hand. "Things don't just happen. Choices do." A door slammed somewhere above us and the sound echoed hard, like a judge's gavel 3 floors up. "I loved you," she said. "I still do." I nodded once. "Maybe, but you didn't choose me." There's a difference older men understand. Feeling versus choosing. One shows up, the other shows up and stays. She swallowed, and I stepped back, keys in hand. The climax, I refused the fog. I put names on the weather, choices, consequences, and walked toward the clear air. We ended up outside my rental later that week, sitting on the concrete steps under a streetlight that hummed like an old refrigerator. She told the longer version, the when, the where, the why that always sounds reasonable in hindsight. I listened because I wanted her to hear herself. When she finished, the quiet felt honest. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. I'd been carrying it like a coin you can't spend and can't throw away. I set it gently on the step between us. "Start with that," I said, "and think about what it was supposed to mean." She stared like it might burn her skin. "I don't want this to be the end," she said. "We built a life." "We did," I said, "and then we built a second one I didn't know about." A breeze moved down the block, lifting the edge of her hair. The climax. I drew the boundary you can see, the metal line that won't lie about where we are. She picked up the ring with both hands, the way you lift a fragile thing you're afraid to drop and more afraid to keep. Her fingers trembled, the kind of shake you can't steady with willpower. "I ended it," she said, and her eyes begged the ring to believe her. "I blocked him." I thought of numbers that can be unblocked, of doors that open if you know where the spare key is hidden. "I should have ended it before it started," she added, voice breaking. That was the truest sentence of the night. I let the weight of it sit there with us. No rescue. A neighbor walked a dog past and didn't look over. Mercy is sometimes the gift of being ignored. "Tell me what to do," she said finally. I shook my head. "That's not my job anymore." She placed the ring back on the step like a failed offering. The climax. She reached for instruction. I left her with responsibility. The words came fast, as they do when the future feels like a door closing. Counseling, new job, new phone. I'll cut every number that isn't family. I'll move if you want. I'll do anything. I've made those lists myself. After surgeries, after layoffs, after hurricanes that taught me which walls matter. Promises have a sound when they're born from fear instead of conviction. They rattle. I held still and let them pass like weather. "We can make rules," she said. "Curfews, apps, checks." That's how people try to fix a cracked foundation. More paint, thicker carpet. "I don't want a prison," I said quietly. "I wanted a marriage." She covered her mouth and nodded like she finally heard the word that had been missing. The streetlight flickered once and steadied. "Please," she whispered. I let the moment stretch until it didn't need me to fill it. The climax. I chose substance over surveillance. No bargain that keeps me small. She tried one last story. How it started small. How it stopped meaning anything once it meant too much. I listened and thought of bells. Once struck, they don't unsound. "You can't unring a bell," I said, not cruel, just plain. She closed her eyes, and I watched the truth land on her shoulders like a coat she didn't want to wear. "So that's it?" she asked. "You walk?" I looked down at the step where the ring sat shining under a tired light. "That's it," I said. "I walk toward peace." She nodded once like a verdict had been read. We stood, two people who had run out of words before we ran out of night. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'll come by. We should talk through logistics. It's not romantic, but it's how adults do endings that won't scar worse than they have to." The climax. I named the physics of trust and accepted the sound that won't be taken back. The apartment looked staged, like a house on the market, counters cleared, candles lit, the kind of clean that hopes to convince. I took my seat at the table where we used to plan vacations and grocery lists and watched her fold her hands like a student ready to recite. "No scripts," I said. "Just truth." She nodded, eyes wet but steady. We covered the map, what to keep, what to sell, what to split without turning every item into a memory trial. She offered therapy again. I didn't argue. Therapy is good. It's just not a time machine. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "I'm here to protect me." She winced and nodded, as if the sentence fit even though it hurt. I reached into my bag and felt the edges of an envelope against my fingers. The room got smaller around that simple weight. The climax. We shifted from emotions to logistics, the grown-up table where endings are signed, not shouted. I set the envelope down between us. No theatrics, just paper and ink, quiet tools that change a life. "These are the final papers," I said, and the candle flame shivered like it heard me. She didn't touch them at first. People think signatures do the damage, but it's the reading that breaks you, the way legal words turn rooms into property and people into parties of the first and second part. She finally slid them closer, eyes moving left to right, stopping at lines that used to be soft conversations. "You already filed?" she whispered. "No," I said, "but I will if I sign tonight." I slid a pen across. She grabbed my hand instead, tears dropping onto the wood. "Please." I let her hold it for a beat, then gently pulled free. I uncapped the pen and hovered over the line with my name. If endings have a sound, this one started as a click. The climax, the sound of a cap clicking open, a small noise that means the moment has arrived. She pulled the envelope closer and began to read, one page at a time, the way you read instructions for a tool you don't want to use. Her fingers shook, small, involuntary waves that told the truth faster than her mouth could. The legal language was dry as toast. Assets, accounts, dates, signatures. But every line translated into something human. Who keeps the photo books? Who calls the bank? Who moves which boxes when? At our age, you learn to respect paperwork. It keeps memory honest. She stopped at the section about the house and pressed her thumb into the margin like she could stall the ink. "I didn't think it would come to this," she whispered. I didn't say me either. I let the quiet underline the moment. The candle threw soft light across her face, and for a second I saw the years, not the damage. Then she turned the next page. The climax, paper, not anger, carried the weight, proof that this ending was real. She finally looked up, eyes glassy with a mix of fear and understanding. "You're really leaving?" The question tried to shrink a lifetime into a yes or no. I thought of the slow walks back from arguments that used to end in apologies and pancakes, the little rituals that glued us together until they didn't. I kept my voice even. "I'm leaving the part where I don't recognize myself," I said. She swallowed. "We can try. We've come back from worse." That's a sentence couples love because it points to old mountains like they guarantee future climbs. "This isn't altitude," I told her. "It's erosion." She blinked, and I could see the math clicking behind her eyes. Separate leases, separate holidays, separate lives. She glanced at my hand, at the faint paler band where the ring used to sit. "Please," she said, "not like this." I slid the envelope a little closer to my side. The climax. The question wasn't if I'd leave. It was when. I set the pen down and leaned in so the words wouldn't wander. "Unless you can give me one reason trust will be different, this gets signed." I didn't say one apology or one promise because I've lived long enough to know the difference. Promises are cheap when panic is expensive. She looked around the room like the answer might be hiding behind a picture frame. "I'll change my number, my job. I'll move cities if I have to. Logistics, not reasons." "That's infrastructure," I said. "Trust is architecture." She shook her head like the metaphor was a language she couldn't speak. "I'll do therapy forever." "Therapy is good," I said, "but it can't rewrite last year." She dabbed at a tear with the cuff of her sleeve and finally exhaled the closest thing to truth. "I don't know how to prove it." I nodded. "Exactly." The climax. I asked for proof no system could fabricate, and the absence of it was the answer. The words broke loose the way riverbanks do after days of rain. "Please, I'll do anything. We can start over. I'll hand you every password. I'll share locations. I'll never go out without you. I let the torrent run. Men my age know the difference between control and care. Surveillance dresses up as love when trust has vacated the house. "I'm not looking to be your warden," I said. "I wanted to be your husband." She covered her face, shoulders shaking, and for a brief second I felt the reflex to rescue. Old muscle memory that flares when someone you once loved is falling. I didn't move. I remembered every night I'd tried to save us alone. "Tell me what to do," she gasped. "I can't tell you how to keep a promise you already broke," I said. The candle flickered hard and steadied. The room smelled like wax and lemon cleaner. The climax. Her pleas ran out of road, and the truth stood without help. I uncapped the pen and held it like a small tool with a large job. The plastic click sounded louder than it should have, the way quiet rooms amplify tiny choices. My name weighted on a line that looked thinner than marriage deserves. "Michael," she said, my name catching on the edges of her breath. I kept my hand steady but didn't drop the nib. I thought of my father's voice, measure twice, cut once, and realized I'd been measuring for months, tracing the same edges until I knew the shape by heart. "This is your last chance," she whispered. "To what?" I asked. "To forget?" A clock in the kitchen ticked like a metronome for decision-making. I hovered, not as a threat, but as a mercy, to myself. The climax. The pen didn't touch the paper, not yet. I wanted the moment to know I took it seriously, that the cut would be clean because I refused to saw. I set the pen down, just for a breath, and finally gave voice to the sentence that had been forming since the night the name lit her screen. "It was never about me not being enough," I said, calm, certain. "It was about you not choosing me, even when you had me." Her head dropped like the words had weight. We talk a lot about enough when we're younger. Money, looks, effort, romance. Like love is a checklist you can audit on a Sunday. Older men learn it's a decision repeated, not a grade earned. "I did choose you," she whispered. "And then you didn't," I answered. Not mean, precise. The room shrank to the space between two people and a form. I picked up the pen again, the way you pick up a tool after you've explained why the job matters. The climax, the line that cleared my doubt. My worth hadn't been on trial. My peace had. I signed. The letters looked like mine and not like mine, the way your signature does when your hand knows what your heart is catching up to. I let the ink breathe, then lifted the pages, aligned their edges, and slid them back into the envelope. "These will be filed tomorrow," I said. The sentence didn't echo. It landed and stayed. She reached for the packet like it might turn soft if she held it long enough. It didn't. I stood and the chair leg scraped a small, honest sound, the kind you remember later as the exact pitch of leaving. She whispered, "Is there anything I can say?" "Not to the past," I said. "It can't hear us." I tucked the envelope under my arm and felt a strange steadiness, like a level finally finding center. The climax. Not the signature itself, but the calm afterward, the quiet of a decision that fit the frame. By the door, she'd lit a candle that smelled like citrus and apology. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool circle I'd carried like a question. I set my ring beside the candle, not thrown, not hidden, placed. A small metal period at the end of a long, run-on sentence. The flame wavered and caught its reflection in the gold, a tiny sun burning in a private sky. I didn't give a speech. I didn't rehearse a line for a movie no one was filming. I just stood there long enough to understand what the gesture said without words. I was done performing endurance. She watched my hand and covered her mouth like it might stop the sound of whatever was breaking. It couldn't. I reached for the knob. The climax. A quiet object spoke for me. The ring made the goodbye final without a slammed door. The door closed with a soft latch that felt like mercy. In the hallway, the air changed, lighter, as if someone had opened a window I couldn't find from the inside. The carpet muffled my steps. The exit sign burned its small, steady red. I caught myself breathing in a way I hadn't in months. Deep, unhurried, like my lungs remembered an old job. The envelope rode easy under my arm. Not a weapon, not a burden, just the next page waiting to be filed. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open to show me myself, a man with tired eyes and a clearer spine. I stepped in and watched the numbers drop, 7, 6, 5, each floor a layer of noise I didn't need anymore. When the doors parted at the lobby, cold night air reached up and met me. Outside, the world kept moving, cars, streetlights, a dog tugging its owner home. The climax. I walked into air that finally let me stand up straight. Mr. Anderson's office had that morning brightness you only get from east-facing windows, honest light that doesn't flatter or lie. The receptionist poured coffee that tasted like decisions, and the chairs had the kind of support you appreciate after 50. I signed in and watched the copier hum behind a glass door, pages coming out square, no drama. Mr. Anderson shook my hand without squeezing too hard. Men our age rid grip like weather. Today, the paper would say what I couldn't keep explaining. We went over the checklist I'd made on a yellow pad. Accounts, titles, timelines, Next steps. Nothing flashy, just the plumbing of a life untangling from another. He spoke in plain English. I asked plain questions. When you've survived layoffs, mortgages, and teenagers, paperwork stops being scary. It becomes a tool. Sun angled across his desk and lit the folder with my name. I placed the envelope down like setting a brick where a wall needs it. The climax. I realized the law wasn't my enemy. It was the rails to carry me forward. We reviewed each page like adults who know the difference between almost and done. He pointed, I read, we nodded. When the pen came my way, I didn't rush. I wrote my name like I meant it. Steady, legible, not hiding in loops. Mr. Anderson initialed where he needed to and stacked the signed pages into a neat pile that looked smaller than the years it represented. He slid me a copy, crisp and warm from the printer. You ready? He asked. Not a push, a check-in. I took a breath that felt measured, not dramatic. I am. He stood, gathered the file, and said the words that sounded like a gate unlocking. I'll file it today. I shook his hand, not to celebrate, but to mark the moment. Outside his door, the hallway felt wider than when I'd walked in. The climax. No victory shout, just the simple handoff. Paper leaving my hands for the system designed to finish what I started. On the elevator down, I heard my own voice in my head, calm and certain. There will be hard days, but they're forward. That's the difference you learn with age. Pain that circles the block versus pain that gets you somewhere. I stepped into the lobby and saw ordinary people do ordinary things. A courier jogging past with a cart, a mom quieting a baby, a guy resetting his tie in the window. Life doesn't pause for your mess. It makes room if you walk with it. I texted James one sentence, filed, and he sent back a thumbs up and a coffee emoji, which is exactly the level of ceremony men like us can handle. I thought of the list on my fridge. Cancel joint memberships, change passwords, schedule a dentist appointment I've been moving for 3 months. Forward comes in big strides and small chores. I pushed through the revolving door and felt it give. The climax. I chose movement over mourning, and the day agreed to carry me. The sidewalk met me with cold air and unfiltered sun, and something in my chest let go like a knot you've worried loose during a long meeting. I didn't sprint or pump my fist. I just stood for a second, palms open, and let the light do what light does. Show edges, soften shadows. A construction crew across the street laughed at something only they heard. Their easy camaraderie felt like a promise that normal still exists. I walked to the corner deli and grabbed a turkey sandwich and a black coffee, the lunch of men who appreciate simple victories. On the bench outside, I ate without rushing. A pigeon inspected my shoe and decided I wasn't a threat. I checked my watch out of habit and smiled at the emptiness of the next hour. No meeting, no script, just steps I chose. When I stood, my shoulders didn't rise with me. The climax. For the first time in months, breath felt like oxygen, not effort. That evening, the rental held me like a sensible chair, no frills, the exact right height. I microwaved leftover takeout and poured tap water into a heavy glass because heft in your hand can steady your head. I opened a window 2 inches and listened to the city's bedtime. A bus groaning, a neighbor's laugh, the soft clang of someone washing a pan. I put fresh sheets on the bed, nothing fancy, clean enough to sleep without thinking too hard, and folded my coat over a kitchen chair like a man who expects to stay. I set a small stack of books by the lamp. A novel I've been pretending to read, the manual for the coffee maker, a spiral notebook with a pen tucked in. I wrote 1 page. What I know, what I'm learning, what I'll refuse to carry. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. The climax. I felt the sturdiness of ordinary, proof that peace hides in routine. The late-night promises returned. I set the phone face down, washed a single plate, and let the quiet outlast the begging. The climax. Restraint as self-respect. I lay back and let the quiet find its shape in the room. For months, silence had felt like punishment, a cold corner you stand in when the teacher says you did wrong. Tonight, it felt earned. Silence didn't feel heavy, I told myself aloud, testing the words on the ceiling. It felt like freedom. I could hear the heater click on, hear it work, hear it stop. Systems doing their jobs without me babysitting, what a luxury. I thought about tomorrow in practical terms. A run around the block, a call to the bank, A new set of keys cut at the hardware store where the guy still knows my name. No hero's journey, just a man choosing a manageable day. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb and set it across the room so habit wouldn't reach for it in the dark. The pillow held my head in a way that felt new. The climax. I slept, not as escape, but as a vote for the life I'm building. Some endings don't sound like explosions. They sound like a door closing softly behind you, and breath finally moving all the way to the bottom of your lungs. I'm not pretending tomorrow will be easy. Lawyers, boxes, habits, hard days are part of the price, but they're forward, not circles. I keep thinking about the ring on that table, the quiet click of a pen, the morning sun on my face as I stepped outside. Those weren't endings, they were green lights. Peace isn't dramatic, it's a key that turns. It's a phone face down. It's a room that doesn't argue with you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's breaking you, even if it's all you've ever known. I'm choosing the long, boring kind of courage. Meals I cook, bills I pay, sleep I earn. If you've been here, you already know the answer that silence gives. If you were in my shoes, would you stay or walk? Comment below. Comment.